Welcome, everybody, to the Genesis Mindset. Firstly, my apologies for a bit of a delayed start. I have a slightly different schedule these days, so my apologies. So what we're going to do is today we're going to be talking about pTGC. I think everybody on Pulse Chain is familiar with pTGC. And one of the things that I've heard a lot about pTGC is, it's just like Atropa. It's one of the things that people have mentioned to me a lot. And obviously, my channel is very synonymous with the Atropa ecosystem. So people have been really curious to see my perspective on it. I have had pTGC for a very long time. I did jeet out on one of my early positions, but thanks to Adam Vibra Finance, I have plenty of pTGC. So I'm a holder and an accumulator still, but I'm very keen to learn more about this ecosystem. So today I'm going to be having a talk with the Greys, so the founder of pTGC, and we're going to be talking about the liquidity web on pTGC and UFO and how this ecosystem works to actually help the whole ecosystem to grow. So with that, let's bring the Greys onto stage. How's it going, man?
Hey, what's up, Steven? Thank you so much for having me on your channel.
Yeah, man, my pleasure. It's been a while. It's been in the making. We've had to postpone it a few times, but we're here finally, which is good to see.
Yeah, of course. We have a long existence of Pulse Chain, so I'm sure we'll have plenty more conversations along the way.
Yeah, actually, the Greys has been around for 8 months, actually. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the genesis of the Greys? How did it all start? What prompted you to get it started? And what was some of the theses behind the development of the project?
Yeah, so when I came into crypto, I came into crypto looking for a place to really invest my money. Once I got here, I realized really quick that it was more of a place to gamble and not really as much as a place to invest. And I think that's where I felt really comfortable landing in the Hex and Pulse Chain ecosystem, because for me, it felt like more of an investment instead of just gambling with meme coins and stuff like that. And that was something I was more looking to do. Obviously, when Pulse Chain started to come out, my gears started turning, and I wanted to set a goal of building a token that was a good investment and that really strived for what I would hope a lot of tokens strive for, but for it to last the length of time. So for it to last multiple cycles, for it to continuously go up, for it to have liquidity for everyone, a lot of the stuff that we're all looking for when we're looking for tokens. And really, when you look at tokens, it is really, really hard to find tokens and investments like that in the crypto space, because the crypto space just is really degenerate. So when you look at tokens, like really their lifespan is usually just a month. So when I started looking at pTGC and how I could build this, I wanted to figure out a way, how can I build
I'm not sure if
reason
it's
to
just me.
hold it and give it a utility. And into pTGC, the main one via the web, which was something that was brand new on Pulse Chain. So when we got on Pulse Chain, we saw Atropa was one of the first tokens, or the first token to do this, where they created a web, and then the arbitrage bots would move their money around the liquidity pools, and that was adding to the volume. And when I noticed that, I was like, that solves the problem of every token that ever exists. Is eventually there's a lack of buyers, which then creates a lack of volume, which then creates sellers. So when I saw this, I actually saw a scenario where if you build a big enough web, you actually never run out of buyers or volume, because as long as the market does what it does, the market always moves up and down. And if your liquidity web's big enough and strong enough, the R bots are always going to have places to move money, which will always add volume to your project over time. So it kind of solves the issue that comes up with every token that ever exists, even the good ones.
So really, this whole journey began by investigating Hex and Pulse Chain, and really, Hex is one of the probably one of the first cryptocurrencies really to have such a long-term perspective with the staking mechanism. And so I think having that kind of a mindset of delayed gratification is something that's really gravitated a lot of people towards Pulse Chain. And so it's really cool that there's a lot of builders like yourself who are really trying to work with that mindset and that ethos of delayed gratification, because really from the perspective of every single successful person on the planet, delayed gratification is one of the fundamental things that they always talk about. Alex Hormozi is someone who's really big at the moment with creating businesses and scaling businesses, and he really talks about delayed gratification a lot. So this is something that is very, very at the forefront of investing, and investing is really about not just cryptocurrency, but your life as well. So let's talk about the liquidity web. So obviously it's something that you've modeled off the Atropa ecosystem. And this is something that's very unique to Pulse Chain, where we do have this liquidity web that's going on. So first of all, tell me how you found this liquidity web. What made you investigate it, or how you found it, and how you actually started to discover, oh, something is different here. What was that journey like?
Yeah, so when I landed on Pulse Chain, at first because like I kind of go back, I really am in crypto for more of a long-term investment kind of style of being here, but then the narrative of PDI and Atropa to me stood out as more of an investment and not as much of a gamble. It was kind of a narrative that was super strong, so I started looking into the narrative. And when we were looking into the narrative, I'm sure you kind of remembered this, when there was huge buys and sells on PDI and Atropa, there would be this inflow of bots that would come in right after that. And right when that was happening, people thought the Atropa dev had like a reserve of funds where they were always protecting the price. But then simply I just followed the transactions on the block explorer, and you can see that it was just coming from the other liquidity pools, and the other liquidity pools were helping support the price of the main liquidity pool. So whenever there was a big buy or sell in the main liquidity pool, the other smaller liquidity pools would come in and fix the price and then level them out until they became equal, making the big size buys and sells would actually become less impactful to the chart. And when I noticed that, the first thing that came to my mind is just being an entrepreneur outside of crypto is when you see money flowing like that, you want to find a way to get yourself in between it. So instantly I saw all this money flowing, and I said, well, these R bots are fixing these liquidity pools, and they're raking in all the profit right now, but the person supplying the LP pool actually isn't making any money. So when I kind of put together, I was like, okay, the Atropa dev has all these liquidity pools, and they're putting up so much liquidity, but every time the R bot moves money to fix the price, the R bot's making all the money and utilizing the Atropa dev's liquidity pools, but the Atropa dev isn't really getting much out of it. So by putting the fee in between this movement, now you can make it so the protocol itself is actually gaining value from putting up the liquidity webs instead of the R bot only gaining the value.
Okay, so really your journey started with the block explorer, looking at all the different transactions that were happening, looking at all the liquidity pools. So for example, this is just page one. So all these contracts are the liquidity pools that exist on Atropa. And this is something that I've covered in previous videos. Just on the first page, there's like 64% of the Atropa tokens in liquidity. So it's a really fascinating thing. And so how did that then inform how you went about going with pTGC and creating pTGC? So you mentioned the R bots. Obviously at the start, there was this kind of myth that there was these magic Atropa R bots, but really the R bots are they just exist on Pulse Chain. So whoever runs the R bots, we don't know, but basically they're just always there. And then the Atropa ecosystem takes advantage of them. And now how did you think, okay, well, I'm going to make something to take advantage of that as well?
Yeah. So what my goal was, and this is like obviously sounds really optimistic, but that was my optimistic goal, was to make a end all be all token. So I wanted to make a token so I studied like 50 other tokens, Hex being one of them, I'll say Cult DAO being one of them, SafeFood being one of them, and many others. And I was like, okay, what did these tokens do to be successful? And what did they do wrong that made them, let's say, go down in price, or even like some I just listed failed? So you kind of look at what they did good and what they did bad, and I try to take all the things that I think they did good and take out the things I believe made them fall, and I try to put a lot of those aspects all into one protocol. And that is really the conglomerate of pTGC. It's a mix between all these other DeFi protocols I see out there, along with what I noticed specifically on Pulse Chain with the Atropa ecosystem, and bonding them all together, because the opportunity that we actually have on Pulse Chain is just so rare, because there's never been an opportunity like this where you can build these liquidity webs where these are bots. So tokens like Atropa and pTGC and UFO actually can't even happen on other blockchains for the most part, which is a unique situation that I don't even think anyone knows besides us people actually here on Pulse Chain.
Right. Totally. 100% agree on that one. No one really gets it. I also speculate on base chain with like 0.0001% of my portfolio, just like $50 here and there. And you try to explain to people like these pump and dumps are just a waste of time. Go somewhere where there's actually sustainable long-term growth, and they don't know anything about it. So I love your process. So when we talk about your process of analyzing this thing that I've highlighted here on your website, are these some of the characteristics that you've basically looked at other kinds of tokens? Okay, these are the things that I've seen that give longevity to a token, or these are the things that have meant that it didn't last, and now I'm going to include it. Is it this list here that we're looking at, fully decentralized, fully autonomous? Is that your list there?
I wouldn't say that's the list. That's just some of the key features that people like to know about the project. They like to know that it's decentralized. They like to know that the DAO is automated. They like to know that you have burnt liquidity. So it's that, what's that sliding across is some of the basic highlights of the protocol that a lot of people like to see right when they start looking into it. They kind of want to know, okay, what's the highlights of this? What are some of the basic features? As far as like specific tokenomics, the easiest one that I like to explain with our tokenomics that a lot of people don't know about is it's fully deflationary but paying out APY. So when you hold a token, and let's say you hold that token and it runs up 100x, and it's just sitting in there, sitting in your wallet, why do you continue to hold that token? You either are going to continue to hold that token because you believe it's going to go higher, or that token is paying you to hold it. If it's not paying you to hold it and you don't think it's going to go higher, there's actually nothing to do with that token besides sell it. So that's something I recognized, and I needed to make sure I included. I needed to make sure that people were incentivized to continue to hold up the token's price by getting paid in additional tokens or PLS, etc. And then one thing I noticed, for example, Hex does this. Hex rewards you for staking your tokens and holding on long term. Hex pays out the rewards in inflation. One thing I thought was hurting Hex at the moment, which, is just due to supply and demand. There's more supply coming out and less demand, so that makes price go down. So I wanted to find a way to do this without having inflation. So we did it off of a fee system instead. But there's something specific about this fee system to where we wanted to make sure with every percent that's paid out in rewards, there's also an equal or more amount going into the LP pools to back that reward that's paid out. So if you pay out rewards, but you're not putting in more PLS into the LP pools to support the rewards you're paying out, those rewards will actually equal down pressure in price over time. So when you look at the pTGC system, 2% of the fee is going to reflections and rewards, but 3% is going to LP ads and buy-in burns, and pretty much to the DAO that does 99% of the time buy-in burns and LP ads. So 3% of every single, or 60% of every single fee is going to more PLS in the LP pool to back the rewards that are getting paid out. And then the rewards that get paid out are 40%. So you constantly have more PLS that will forever back the price of the rewards getting paid out. So even if everyone sold every reward they ever got, the price can still go out because there's more PLS going into the LP pools to back that reward getting paid out. And I've never really seen someone do that in crypto and care about doing that. All they always care about is we have to get in another buyer. We have to get in another buyer to support this price. But I was like, you don't need to get in another buyer. You just need to make sure that the rewards you're paying out are justified and backed by real value. So if you're constantly putting more real value in while paying out those rewards will never actually equal down pressure onto the chart.
So even from that perspective, as well as we look at the block explorer here, so just a very quick question. I'm very curious because I didn't know that the supply was all those threes. I actually just did something as well. I'm creating an experiment where I'm this many. So what prompted you to have a token supply like this, just out of curiosity?
So being on Pulse Chain, I think you probably realize this, and like we have like this weird connection with 369 and 555 and threes and stuff like that. So even like the end of my Twitter handle and stuff like that. I think it's fun to connect these protocols in your username with numbers that relate to, 369 and stuff like that.
Okay, fair enough.
I also think having a token supply like that, it's pretty similar to RH. I studied RH front and back, left and right when designing this. So I take a lot of the things that he says and I try to implement it in the protocols. And one of the things he always talks about is you want, when your token goes up a bunch of X's, you want it to land at numbers that are easy for people to understand. You don't want them to still have tons of zeros in front of it, but then you also don't want the token price to be too high to where it feels expensive. So you don't want it to be like at $1,000, but you also don't want it to be at 0.000001, if that makes sense. So that was kind of a goal when we were thinking of the tokenomics. After we did a certain amount of X's, we wanted it to land at a number most humans would feel comfortable with and understand.
Okay, gotcha. So now as we look through the block explorer, just so people can start to familiarize themselves with the block explorer as well. So this is the Pulse Chain, well, one of the Pulse Chain debt addresses, 369. And so over 10% of the supply has been burnt, thrown away forever. So that's sell pressure completely removed, 10% of the supply completely removed.
And that's bought and burnt. So a lot of projects will just send what they mint for free to the debt address to make it feel like part of it's gone, like Shiba Inu did this and stuff like that. But really that doesn't do anything for the protocol because there is no economic energy that just bought it. They literally mint it and send it. So 100% of what's in the pTGC burn address has actually been bought with PLS and then sent to that debt address. So technically what that debt address is it's an investor that's bought more than $1 million. It's like $1.5 million worth of pTGC who is never going to sell. So there's a constant, it's not human, it's code, but pretty much there's just constant code buying with everyone else and making it so no matter where you're buying on the chart, there's something buying with you and after you and before you, making it so the price continues to go up over time, ultimately.
So now this process here, this is happening through the arbitrage, right? So then through the arbitrage, there's a fee that gets taken out that does the buy and burn, correct?
Yeah, so it's during the arbitrage or human interaction as well. So when a human buys or sells, they also pay the fee. If an arbitrage bot buys and sells, they pay the fee as well.
Fantastic. That's brilliant. So that's built into the code. So any buying and selling has a tax, and then that tax goes to buying the token back and then burning it. That's amazing. So it's like it's automated buy pressure, and then it's removing sell pressure from the system.
Yeah, 100%. And then the pTGC isn't the only thing doing that. There's other tokens like UFO has a 1% buy and burn fee of pTGC in its protocol. So PTGC isn't only getting bought and burnt by itself, but then there's other tokens as well that are buying and burning it at the same time, making it so it has a team of other smart contracts that are also working with it to help push the price up over time.
Okay, I see. So before we get into UFO, so how did you go about designing and setting up your liquidity web? So I won't go through all the contract addresses here, but again, you can see these contract addresses. These are the liquidity pools. So already on page one, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So that's just on page one. So that's going to be page one of many. There's over 6,000 holders. So yeah, that's brilliant. So how did you go about designing the liquidity web? What kind of thinking did you have behind that?
Yeah, so we ultimately wanted to make as big of pairings with the blue chips of Pulse Chain as possible, because when we create this liquidity web, we're forever bonding ourselves to these other tokens. So if you're going to bond yourself to another token, you want to obviously vet that token to see if you believe that token's going to go up in price. Automatically, right off the bat, we had such an affiliation with studying Atropa, and we believed in what they were building. We obviously connected a large amount with PDI, Atropa, and Teddy Bear, because we saw what they were doing. We believed in what that dev was doing, so we wanted to bond ourselves to them. We also connected ourselves to all the RH tickers. So Hex, Pulse, PulseX, Inc. Also, we did some with Wrap Bitcoin and stuff like that. The idea there goes the same, is ultimately if the RH tickers don't succeed, the blockchain most likely won't succeed. So it was best for us to lock in ourselves with what we believed over the long term of Pulse Chain will be here forever with us.
Okay, so the first biggest three pools obviously are Pulse Chain to Grayscale. So you've got nearly 4 billion Pulse in there. You've got 26 million PDI. So again, I mean, if PDI goes up to $1, the arbitrage that's going to happen between that is going to lift up all of pTGC with it. And then what have we got here? So buy and burn, is that what's the
That's an amplifier token of the pTGC ecosystem. So there's tokens that are underneath pTGC that also have like mini webs connected, and they also they're mainly for arbitrage bots. So they just arbitrage very smallly every single day, and they also add to pTGC as well.
Okay, so is that basically what the notorious one here is alluding to, that everybody has a token with an LP web, but do you have a deep burned LP and DAO? And so this is what PTG is really doing different.
Yeah, so for me, the liquidity, I've seen a lot of people try to replicate the liquidity web and stuff like that. And when you connect yourself to a bunch of other tokens, that's good, because you're ultimately creating a diversified investment account with one token. And that's what's also kind of cool with PTGC, is when you look at the web of PTGC, it's so strong, is when you own PTGC, you technically just own all those tokens into one. Because if one goes up, it raises the price of PTGC in that web or in that pool, and then the other liquidity pools have to even it out, obviously, but it actually operates in a fully decentralized way to actually have an investment account in all the blue chips of Pulse Chain. So obviously everyone can do this. Anyone can create a token and put a liquidity web to it. But the thing is, in my opinion, if you don't have tokenomics that will forever lift up the price of the token over time, you're just letting our bots run through your pools free of charge. And it's actually not bringing up the price of your protocol. You're just kind of bouncing around with the market everywhere it goes. And there's no value actually being brought to your protocol from that. It's just kind of bouncing you up and down, which is very unique for Pulse Chain. In my opinion, it's the best opportunity ever, because we have this specific opportunity on Pulse Chain where we got to create these liquidity webs with not just one token, but 10 tokens at extremely discounted prices. So even right now, for an example, there's never been another blockchain where the founder of the blockchain has his own blockchain, his own DEX, his own Bitcoin on another chain, his own incentive token paying out, and you can never get all those at the same time at the bottom. And once one of them takes off, they all take off together, and you get to ride all of them up with Hart's law at the same time, while also taxing all the arbitrage opportunity that happens on the way. There's never been one scenario in all of blockchain history where one person has monopolized the whole, or not the whole entire market, but a lot of the key tools for a blockchain to be successful. And that's one of the most awesome things about being here on Pulse Chain is we're able to make a web with all these things at the bottom. Like, let's say if Ethereum had cheap gas fees, and so our bots could actually move. They can't really move over there because it costs too much to do a transaction. So by the time they pay for the transaction, there's not even much of a gap to make money anymore. But let's say they did have cheap transactions. Well, Ethereum's already up 10,000x, so you're not going to get any huge Hart's Law from there. The DEX token's completely separated. That's already up 10,000x. Every new token that comes out is too speculative, so you can't even put huge lump sums into it. So, and this is mostly every other blockchain that exists that has any value of building on. There's the opportunity of doing this is just not there. Pulse Chain is this just weird, unique opportunity that, in my opinion, is going to be amazing once the whole ecosystem starts to move up. Protocols that actually have real value tied to this ecosystem is just going to get dragged up with it. And then in our case, let's say Pulse Chain goes up 10x, the whole ecosystem roughly will probably go up 10x as well as far as the blue chips go, because everything's connected to everything and everything's ratio based in LP. If one pTGC is equal to one PLS and PLS goes to $1, then pTGC is also worth $1. Everything's ratio based. So how I look at it is if Pulse Chain goes up 10x from here, that's a free 10x to pTGC, and then that's a free 10x to all our liquidity pools. And if our liquidity pools go up 10x, that means that our bots have to move 10x the amount of money, which means we get to do 10x the amount of buy-in birds, 10x the amount of rewards. So if we're paying out 20% APY right now on a fully deflationary token, well, if the ecosystem 10x's, now we're going to be paying out 200% APY on a fully deflationary token, which hasn't really been done in crypto before that's been sustainable. Yes, it stays, like, it's happened before, but at some point the music stops because you run out of buyers, you run out of volume. But by making this liquidity web, you actually never run out of buyers or volume because you're capitalizing on the best utility out there. It's a utility that actually isn't selling a product to anyone. The utility is that you have so much LP, and that LP is capitalizing on the market doing what the market does. The market has one thing it does. It goes up and down. That's the only guarantee. So when you have a liquidity web, the market moves up and down, which creates volatility shifts in your liquidity pools, and they become mismatched. And then our bots have to fix it. So then they bring them back to good, and you rake in that fee. That's the only guarantee I've ever found in crypto. And our web and our tokenomics take advantage of that and then bring that value back to one singular token, making it so our utility pretty much just uses the whole entire crypto market as a whole. As it moves up and down, we bring the value back to one token. And the bigger we make our pools, the more value we bring back.
So how many liquidity pools would you say that pTGC is connected to?
I'd say about 20. To me, it's not so much the quantity, but it's the total amount of value in the liquidity pool. So between pTGC and UFO, I'd say there's around $3 million in liquidity. And that's at the bottom of Pulse Chain, obviously. So for an example, if Pulse Chain does a 10x from here, the liquidity pools will be roughly at, I would say, minimally $30 million. And that's based on pTGC and UFO not going up in price at all. That's specifically just based on the base tokens going up in price. So the more liquidity we have, so if we get to $30 million, now the R bots have $30 million to play with instead of $3 million to play with, making it so our ecosystem actually can rake in value from more money, making us buy and burn and add LP and pay rewards even faster. So then like you kind of think back and you're like, okay, well, if I'm here on Pulse Chain, I obviously believe in Pulse Chain. Like, what do I believe in Pulse Chain? I believe Pulse Chain is going to do a 10x. Well, without any choice, you now believe in pTGC and UFO because of how much liquidity we have with the Pulse Chain ecosystem. And when you think about it, Pulse Chain is like a pool because it's so large and so many people are invested in it. And then pTGC and UFO are like a little cup. So let's pretend you had a hose, and the hose is the volume coming in during the bull market. When you throw that hose in the pool of Pulse Chain, it's going to take a whole day to fill that pool up. But when you throw that hose inside a cup, it will fill that cup up in a second because it's such a small pool. And that's where X's come from. The smaller the token and the smaller the pool, the quicker the X is. And it's not that we have lack of like liquidity for our users. It's just we're such a small niche token that the amount of X's that can actually be produced out of it are quite easy compared to a large blockchain like Pulse Chain or PulseX, who have these huge stack rates and huge liquidity pools. The amount of volume, the amount of water to actually get the X's there is quite a lot. The amount that need to flow into us is quite a little to get the X's. And then on top of that, we get the X's also from Pulse Chain as well.
So it's like you've got your Pulse Chain here, this big, I mean, yeah, the scales aren't going to be correct here, but you've got this gigantic pool of Pulse Chain, the liquidity here, and then you've got the liquidity in pTGC, and then really just a huge amount would make Pulse Chain kind of slowly, but then an equal huge amount would make pTGC balloon up a lot more, the liquidity, and then obviously the price is going to balloon up as well.
Yeah, well, if you think about it, like anyone that comes into Pulse Chain, because of tied liquidity, if Pulse Chain goes up 2x, pTGC gets dragged up 2x, not considering, you know, our liquidity pools will obviously shift. And, you know, if PDI doesn't run at all and Pulse Chain does, then, you know, it gets shifted to where we only maybe go up 50% of that. But let's say the whole Pulse Chain ecosystem goes up 2x. Well, automatically, pTGC goes up 2x. But we know every time someone bridges into a new blockchain, most of the time they don't just land on that blockchain and say, I'm good. They usually start to speculate on the best altcoins on that blockchain. So when people bridge into Solana, they're not landing on Solana or Base and saying, oh, I'm good, I got Base, I got Solana. No, they start speculating with the best tokens on that blockchain. So we don't even we get the X's from people coming, and then that raises the X's of Pulse Chain, but then we also get to double dip because then they then speculate on the small alt tokens on that blockchain, making it so we get the X's from the Pulse Chain going up, but then we also get X's from when they go and find the small knit communities that have long-term value and utility and fundamental reasons why the price should go up over time.
Sure, and that's one of the beautiful things about Pulse Chain is the volume and the price is so low, but as people start to come into the chain, and honestly, I'm hoping they come into the chain last. I want it to stay as low as possible for as long as possible. Then just automatically, just by virtue of being bonded, all these tokens are also going to go up in value as well. Just when people put their value into Pulse Chain and bring it into Pulse Chain, it's going to make Pulse Chain price rise, which is going to make all the tokens that are bonded with rise, which is also going to make all the other tokens that say pTG is bonded with also rise by virtue of just being bonded with Pulse Chain and pTGC. There's going to be so much arbitrage that goes on between all these opportunities just when people enter the blockchain. So if we end up doing what Matic did, this is something that Moon King talks about quite a lot. If we end up running last, like Matic did, it's a massive blessing, man. It's like I'm really crossing my fingers that scenario plays out, because all that liquidity, it's a universal thing. People are worried about the price, but man, money just goes where it can make money. At the moment, people's perception is, oh, there's value out there in Solana and Base and Ethereum. But once that all gets dried out and it's heading towards the end of the bull market, people are going to want to go where the value is, or where the cheapest, where the new opportunity is. And all it's going to take is just a little bit of people starting to flow into Pulse Chain. We've got plenty of big whales that can even set that off. We've seen things with the origin address. We've got other big whales. We've got God Whale. Once that process starts to happen, the liquidity is really going to flow, and it's going to carry all these tokens up, and all the tokens that they're bonded with. It's going to be really one of the most magnificent sights in all of cryptocurrency, the end of the bull market in Pulse Chain. I think it's going to be the most epic thing that we're ever going to see in crypto, in the history of crypto up until this point.
Yeah, it's literally set up that way, and it's amazing. And you know, another cool thing that not a lot of people have, like, there's so much volume from arbitrage bots on Pulse Chain. Once, like right now, there's lack of volume because we're below SAC rate. But easily once, like we even saw it last time when we went like a 1x above SAC rate, like everyone's feeling good, everyone's happy. The morale has changed so easily here on Pulse Chain just with a 1x, 2x. But let's say a 5x, 10x. Well, all these liquidity pools, not just pTGC and UFO, Atropa ecosystem, Tangang ecosystem, all these other sub-communities, our liquidity pools will all grow. All these tokens that have product market fit and strong communities, we're all going to win. And then when we all win, our liquidity pools will be bigger, and the R bots will move more money and more money and more money. Since we have so many R bots here on Pulse Chain, our actual volume on chain will be actually so high, and it won't be real volume from users, but it will be volume from arbitrage bots where no one cares about that statistically. So reading on-chain volume compared to other chains, we're going to rank up really high. And then when we rank up really high, we're going to look awesome. And then that's a bunch of free advertisement, which then brings more people in, and then more people in, and then more people in. And then, so we'll get a bunch of free advertisement just because of all the arbitrage bots moving liquidity pools in the webs around. And that's due to all of our communities stepping up and putting this, and building real protocols. Like, dude, all these people, like not just pTGC and UFO, Atropa, Tangang, like building real value here. When Pulse Chain succeeds, we're all going to look like the best tokens ever because we actually have real fundamental bases and use cases and utility. And like, for an example, our utility, like in my opinion, I've never heard of another token having a utility that doesn't need any human interaction. Like pTGC and UFO need zero human interaction whatsoever for price to go up forever. It just utilizes liquidity web. There isn't anything like that on crypto. So as soon as Pulse Chain is starting to move up and some of these things with Richard Hart get solved, people are going to flood here like no other. And then on top of that, we're going to have tons of artificial volume from arbitrage bots, which will rank us probably in the top 4 or 5 of blockchains, which is tons of free advertisement for Pulse Chain.
It's a very, very unique situation, man. And even in terms of the volume, like people really underestimate the power of volume because like I said before, I'm doing a couple of things on base chain. And one of the first things whenever a token rugs, I'm like, oh man, this is crap. Go to Pulse Chain. And they'll look at the volume and they're like, well, there's no volume there. But if you look on base chain as well, you look at tokens with like, they just have that. It's all just artificial volume as well. But it's all like really fake volume. That's like, you'll have a token with a market cap of like 50K, but then its volume is like 1.3 million. All it is just a bot that is just buying up that token, and it's just giving all this fake value to that token, which then ends up just getting rugged out of it. With the R bots here, it's a different kind of a volume that's being generated by the R bots because it's being distributed between the network of tokens, between the web of tokens. So it's really something really, really unique. It's really something quite beautiful. So Pulse Chain is really, man, like I'm emphatic on this point where I believe in the future, there's going to be a point where the way of doing crypto is going to be pre-Atropa ecosystem and post-Atropa ecosystem. The right way of doing cryptocurrency is going to be how Liquidity Web works. If you don't have a Liquidity Web, you're going to get left behind. You're going to be using and operating on DeFi 1.0. We're in DeFi 2.0 with the Atropa ecosystem, and nobody even realizes it yet. So, I'm just drawing this little web here just to kind of illustrate this point. But the more connections there are between all these little webs, the arbitrage is just it's capitalizing on all these different connections. It's a really beautiful thing. So as one thing just moves, as one thing just moves, it moves the whole web. So you've got, so you mentioned there's about 20. I'm sure that there's a lot more than 20 now, because I'm like, for example, like other people will have their tokens that they bond with pTGC. And so as soon as this moves, it's fluctuating all of these tokens with it, just automatically. It's such a it's such a unique thing.
With
So when
with
the
every
volume
action,
really
there's a
starts to grow,
reaction, and then that reaction waves out to every other token. Like
man,
I'll give this example. PDI was going down, and a whale came in and bought like $80,000
mm,
of PDI. So
saw
this
that.
person, when they did that, they used the auto router on Pulse X. When he used the auto router on Pulse X, it spreads his buyout amongst many liquidity pools so he gets the best price. Well, UFO has a huge liquidity pool with PDI. It's like 300K or something like that. So $15,000 of his purchase actually got routed through UFO. When it got routed through UFO, it did a PLS to UFO. So that's 15K of volume. And then it went UFO to PDI, which is another 15K of volume. So we got 30K of volume from someone not even trying to get UFO, but utilizing our liquidity web. And then he got out. But then when he did this action, that 30K of volume flowing through us, within the same minute, it caused a reaction. All the R bots in the rest of our liquidity web went crazy because of that price fluctuation. So then it caused another 15K in volume within a 2-minute period. So we got 45K of volume just by one whale trying to make a transaction of PDI. Had nothing to do with us. But with every action, there's a reaction, and then it bevels out to the rest of the liquidity web. So since we latch ourselves onto these other tokens like HEX, EHEX, PulseX, anything that happens with these, we get a cause reaction from all that. And that's just due to bonded liquidity. And Richard Hart talks about this so often. It's just a lot of, like, when you really break it down, it's like, if you bring value to a protocol and you lock the liquidities together, you're like now bonding yourself to Richard Hart's products with your products. So whatever Richard Hart's products do, you now get to reap the benefits because you've put up so much liquidity with his products. And now the PulseX auto router is forced to run huge purchases through our liquidity pools because we have some of the biggest liquidity pools with these big tokens like PDI. Like, this even happens with EHEX. I think we have the second biggest liquidity pool with EHEX on Pulse Chain. So whenever someone wants to buy
Wow.
EHEX, yeah. So whenever someone wants to buy EHEX, they're forced to interact with pTGC and UFO. And the reason we're able to do this is UFO is actually designed in a certain way where it incentivizes people to add liquidity in the liquidity web. And when it incentivizes people to add liquidity to the liquidity web, that not only helps the user, but it helps UFO itself. And that usually doesn't happen too much in the real world, where the user wins and the end product wins. Usually it's one or the other. But with UFO, we found a way that we could get the users to put their tokens to work for them. And when they put the tokens to work for them, we pay them in PLS to do so via the smart contract. And then when they're earning additional PLS rewards by putting their tokens to work for them, UFO and pTGC are actually buying and burning at a faster rate, making it so the price goes up faster over time, making it so they feel better about their investment and they become richer, making it so their liquidity pool gets bigger, so they make more money, and then it's just a domino effect, and it's like a snowball effect. It just keeps building and building and building. And with all this, again, just no human interaction is needed. The whole entire crypto market, as it moves, it's just a ripple effect, and that ripple effect lands on Pulse Chain. So if there's a dump on ETH, there's a dump on Pulse Chain. If there's a gain in ETH or a gain in Bitcoin, that ripple effect, a gain in Pulse Chain. And every time this happens, it's a action and a reaction, and that action and reaction is volume to pTGC and UFO when you get to the end of that ripple.
Wow. I'm trying to verify. I just want to see if I can find this. if it's up here, the pTGC. Oh, won't be able to find it there. Oh, UFO. Wow, UFO's up there with 43 million hex and 26 billion UFO. So UFO is the 5th biggest LP with hex from Ethereum.
Okay, yeah, 5th. I thought it was the 2nd, but yeah, maybe 5th.
Yeah, this is a bit strange. It's got DAI stablecoin, but it's showing 252. So that can't be right. This is meant to be the biggest pool, so that doesn't, with 685 million hex. So that number must be wrong somehow. Maybe it's not showing the decimal points properly or something. So
yeah, I could be wrong though. Sometimes it's hard to find, but I know the biggest EHEX pair I believe is with pHEX, and that's like a 500K liquidity pair. And then I think we're pretty neck and neck just with WPLS.
Yeah.
And EHEX.
Yeah, that's yeah. I mean, the block explorer is a bit dodgy sometimes. So, nice, man. So okay, so I mean, even if we look at in terms of pTGC, in terms of pTGC at the minute on just a pulse chain, you're at an 80% dip here. It can go down to this other price level here, where you got an 85% dip. At the very, very worst, it could go down to here, which is like 90, 92%. I know people freak out about these sorts of things, but that's when I'm licking my lips, because that's when I'm starting to accumulate. The best time to accumulate, in my opinion, is when it's at least 80 to 90% of a dip. But it's going to be really interesting to see how the liquidity webs hold these tokens up to not fall that deeply. So
a lot of the fall just at this point has came from Pulse Chain falling because to our tied liquidity with Pulse Chain. So ultimately, if Pulse Chain goes on an 80% dip, it will suck pTGC down an 80% dip as well. And the only way we can outperform that dip is by buy pressure. So even though we've had buy pressure and sell pressure against Pulse Chain, what it ultimately is right now we're walking up a down escalator. So Pulse Chain's the down escalator and pTGC is trying to walk up it, but it's right now the Pulse Chain or the escalator is bringing us back. But once that escalator flips, it's the same scenario. It's like walking up an up escalator. You're walking up twice as fast because the escalator is actually pulling you up in the upwards direction instead of backwards.
So this is where people talk about leveraged plays on the ecosystem. So for example, if let's just say Pulse Chain just drops a little bit further, it might come down to here. But then, I mean, Pulse Chain is really, it's almost at the whale sacrifice rate. I would almost say it's probably at the bottom, like very close to the bottom. And as that starts to move up, you're getting the leverage, you're getting a leverage movement on something like pTGC. One of the only things that could make, well, I mean, there's a few things that can make it move down, but the thing yesterday with Pulse Latina, that could cause some more downside pressure if whoever that scammer was ends up selling whatever the holdings are into some kind of stable coin and bridges out. That would cause it to continue to drop, because I think it was like $600,000 worth of tokens basically. So but yes, if Pulse Chain starts to move up,
that guy or girl or whatever was in my DMs trying to add liquidity with pTGC and UFO, but super glad I didn't, because obviously they would have just stole all that money and ran with it. And I saw that they did that with P-Drip. They did a partnership with P-Drip, and P-Drip sent them the money, and they just stole all P-Drip's money. Luckily, I didn't even look into the protocol. The reason why I just said no right off the bat, like I didn't even get to the point of acknowledging it, is because I knew Latina was an inflationary token that gets paid out if she didn't rug everyone. Like the idea of it was it was like incentive token to where it gets paid out as APR for people participating in the farm. I was like, well, why would I want my protocol locked in with your completely inflationary token with no reason not to dump on the market for the rest of existence? And that was just right off the bat. I'm like, I would never pair with that. That would just be absolutely ridiculous for me to consider. Little did I know, like I didn't even go down to try to vet her or anything like that. I was just specific on math, like just basic math, like don't pair with something that goes down in price, pair with something that goes up in price, so you go up in price. You know what I mean? And it's just
makes sense.
Obviously, it was a good decision.
Very good decision. Yeah, didn't pass the vibe check for me either. I'm going to say he wanted to basically for me to put some content on my YouTube channel, but didn't pass the vibe check. I was like, no, I don't really vibe with this, and I certainly that's not what my channel is about. I don't want to bring just random projects on and talk about them. But in any case, let's move on. So UFO, what about UFO? Tell us a little bit about UFO and UFOs, how UFO operates within the ecosystem. So I don't know if there's going to be a better chart that you want me to bring up. So should I bring up UFO to pTGC, for example?
I would just bring it up to WPLS.
Okay, I've got it to WPLS at the moment. So,
something looks a little strange with that one, but
yeah, maybe I will bring up. So what's this one? So this is V2. Is there another? Oh, so that's the V2, which looks like it's probably the biggest pool, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe the settings on it. Are you to USD or?
To PLS and to USD. I'll put it on logarithmic.
Yeah, something looks off with it for sure, because that's not how it looks for me.
Okay. Maybe I'll.
Oh, yeah, that looks more like it.
So that was the daily.
Huh.
Okay. So how does UFO work within the ecosystem? What's UFOs? I mean, I don't get too concerned about these sorts of things anyway. You get a lot of this kind of stuff happening when you get bonding going on and the way that it's connected with the ecosystem. So what is UFOs function within the ecosystem?
Yeah. So when I start, so like the idea of pTGC had never ever like really been done in crypto.
Oh, he just got rugged. We'll have to wait for him to come back up. So yeah, UFO is definitely a new one. So as you can see with the pTGC, there's a lot going on. So they got staking, they got a DAO, a game. I didn't know they had a game. So they got some stats here as well. So how it works, users buy tickets with PLS. Gray's game is a decentralized and automated raffle that pays winners rewards in pTGC. Then we have the pTG stats. Game ends in 7 hours and 9 minutes. Wow, top winner. Top winners get 350 million pTGC. That's pretty damn good. Then we got the TGC stats. So this is where it's going to hopefully, once it comes back up, show us the burned LP. So the total pTGC burned till now, so 10.68%. So this is what we saw here. So this was the 10.68% here, which is bought and burned. So between all the buys and sells, then the contract buys and sells some of the supply, between every buy and sell, the contract buys some supply and burns it. So that's what we're seeing here with the 10.68. Projected burned in so almost 20% in the next 6 months. So at these prices, that's $761,000 worth of pTGC. Over 1.2 million will be burnt within another 6 months. So that's pretty full on. So that's incredible, man. So what have we got here? So we got 24% of the supply is staked, 37.9% is staked and locked, 10% is burnt. So yeah, that's the burnt supply. 5.7 is in liquidity pools and 21% is held. So very interesting. Hey, Snowflake Society, thank you so much. $50. Awesome. Yeah, guys. Yeah, if anyone wants to support the channel, I would definitely appreciate the what are they called? I don't get that many. I forgot what they're called. Super chats. Yeah, it helps the channel grow because it puts it out into the algorithm. And as you guys may or may not know, I'm a full-time volunteer. So I do all of this stuff is just I run a business 7 days a week, but I'm a volunteer for it. So anything that anything that people contribute really goes towards the vision of building more meditation centers in the future. It'll end up going back into the crypto, which will end up going back into meditation centers and wellness centers, which I believe is my solution to helping the world become a much better place for everybody to live. More peace, more harmony, more unity, not just in the mind, but in the heart as well, so we can all live as one. So thank you so much for that, Snowflake Society. I appreciate that, man. Okay, you got rugged there, Mr. Grays.
Yeah,
Where were
sorry, my phone died, so I had to grab this other old phone that I had because it wasn't charging fast enough as we were
Oh,
talking.
good, man.
Yeah, so what I was saying is, when pTGC was created with this liquidity web and the idea of doing fee tokens mixed with liquidity webs and them ultimately just constantly arbing and creating forever volume, that's not really been done before. There's not a blockchain this has been done before. So we were studying a lot of it. And then what we found when studying it was the liquidity web itself was so powerful. We wanted to find a way to add to this. And the best way to add to that is actually coming together as a community and adding to it as a whole instead of just with pTGC, all that liquidity besides a couple like benevolent people in our community. But for the most part, it's all protocol owned and burned. So with UFO, we decided to connect with the community and create a farm to where people could add to the web and earn PLS while also when they do that, they're earning PLS for themselves. But then at the same time, it's buying and burning UFO and pTGC and also rewarding holders of UFO. So when we incentivize people to do this, it makes the web really, really big naturally, just with, people wanting to put their tokens to work for them. And this actually creates an awesome scenario for them because a lot of people had all their RH tokens just sitting in their wallet. Well, now they can put their RH tokens to work with our ecosystem and earn PLS with those tokens while also increasing the price of UFO and pTGC and rewarding holders of UFO.
And so this is all done through the website in the staking protocol, right?
Yeah, so if you go to the UFO tab.
Really nice website, by the way. Really, really nice. You've upgraded it since I last looked at it. I looked at it a few months ago, I think, and it was quite different. It's really, really lovely now.
Yeah, it was orange before. We kind of gave it some pulse chain colors. Felt like
Nice,
it fit
man.
a little bit more.
Love it.
Yeah, so what we did is UFO is pretty much a smart contract that interacts with Pulse X. So I guess this is going to be the best example of what I believed happened yesterday is a lot of times with farms, you give up self-custody. So you give that farm your tokens and they pay you in some other token. And what RH always talked to us about is you want to keep self-custody. So how I tried to design all the protocols like pTGC and UFO, even when you stake pTGC, the tokens remain in your wallet. So even when you're staking, when you're locking, you keep complete self-custody. And when UFO, I wanted to do this too, which was really difficult because when you provide liquidity, you get PLP tokens. And I actually can't change the code of PLP tokens because PLP tokens are coded by the PulseX devs, not my devs. So I can't manipulate the code to make it work in ways that I want it to work. So then I had to find ways to work around this. But the main thing that I wanted to ensure was when people are providing liquidity, I want it to interact with PulseX and I want their PLP tokens to remain in their wallet. So no matter what, they always keep self-custody. Why is this important? It's important because when you send tokens to a smart contract and that smart contract becomes a vault, now that becomes like a golden ticket for scammers or hackers and stuff like that, because they just have to hack that one smart contract to get thousands of people's crypto. So that's why self-custody is important in smart contracts is you don't want to send everyone's tokens to one smart contract because if that smart contract gets compromised, everyone loses their money. I don't care how good your tokenomics are. I don't care how good your price chart is. I don't care how rich you make people. If you get everyone's money stolen, none of that means anything. So with the protocols we develop, we make sure that you just keep self-custody all the time. So when you interact with our farm, all you're actually interacting with is Pulse X. But when you interact with it, the smart contract is registering you as when you run it through, it pretty much calculates how much UFO you have at that point of the creation of the LP pool, and you get a UFO share. And the more UFO shares you have, the more percentage of the PLS you get. So let's say there was 1,000 UFO shares put out and you had 100 of them. Well, then you would get 10% of all the PLS rewards because you have 10% of all the UFO shares.
Okay, gotcha. And so to accumulate UFO as well, it's just a token that you can buy first of all, or do you get this rewarded in any other part of the PTG ecosystem, or you buy this token and then you would set it up in a liquidity pool?
Yeah, you buy it. So you'd have to go on PulseX and buy it out of PulseX.
Okay, and then you add it to a liquidity pool, and then the percentage that you add, or the percentage that you have within the liquidity pool determines the percentage of the PLS rewards that you get.
Kinda, but it's a little bit more complicated than that because it's based on UFO shares and stuff like that. So you can add the reason you need the UFO shares is because there's 7 different liquidity pools you can add into. So it's not your specific percent of that liquidity pool because it's all the liquidity pools. So with a normal farm, each liquidity pool has its own APR rate. And we didn't want each liquidity pool to have its own APR rate because then people would be more incentivized to go into one specific pool. But we didn't want people to be incentivized to go to one specific pool because that wouldn't help the web. If we didn't if there was no bias decision on going to a pool because there's more rewards, then people just make a decision based on what they want more of or what they have too much of or what they have extra of, which makes the web stronger because then the web gets more spread out, making it so there's more arbitrage opportunity for bots. But even if you don't even have to provide LP with the ecosystem to get APY. You can also just hold the UFO token. Some people don't like providing LP because of impermanent loss and stuff like that. So we also wanted to make it so users could just hold UFO and also just earn APY. It's obviously not as much as if you provide LP because when you provide LP, you're helping the system a lot more than people who are just holding.
I see. Okay, so a lot of this is, like I read here, is engineered to foster a unity between Richard Heart ecosystem and the Grays currency. So very, very cool. So on a side note, what about, you got Richard Hart? What about Shane Hart? Have you got any integration with Shane Hart? So Shane Hart has actually just jumped into the chat right now. So everybody, we're pretty blessed to have Shane Hart Schuler here.
We don't, sadly. I don't know if I follow him or he just pops up on my feed, but I have seen his videos and he seems like he's always trying to help the Pulse Chain community and stuff like that. So that's how I like to look at people. If they're here and they're trying to do good and they're not scamming people and they're trying to bring positive energy, then they're good for being here on Pulse Chain.
I agree, man. I agree. I think everything. I think all the communities are fantastic for Pulse Chain, whether I hold the tokens or not. So, awesome, man. So, is there any other like big updates that you want to cover? Anything else in particular that you want to cover about pTGC or UFO or anything else in particular?
I wouldn't say there's any big updates. Right now, obviously, Pulse Chain is down, and we're just utilizing this time to keep buying and burning our supply and buying and burning LPs. Just today, we bought like roughly 180 million pulse worth of pTGC and ink and provided LP between them and then burnt it. So that's just one example. We're doing that stuff with our DAO every week. UFOs always compounding on itself, adding more LP. Users are coming in, adding more LP. So right now we're just utilizing this extra time we have to make our foundation even stronger for our ecosystem. And the stronger we can make the foundation, the taller our building can be. And that's kind of what we're doing right now.
Wow. And so when you say we bought with $180 million of Pulse Chain, 180 million Pulse worth, is that people who are key members of the community who sacrificed their own funds for that, or did those funds come from somewhere in particular with pTGC?
Yeah, those funds came from the fee system of pTGC. So with every single transaction from the RBots or human interaction, we have a DAO. And the top 100 stakers of pTGC get to pick how those DAO funds get spent. And 99% of them just go to buy and burns and LP ads. And today was luckily one of those days that a DAO proposal got approved for a buy and burn of LP with pTGC and Inc. So that was carried out today.
Wow. Okay. All right. That's pretty cool. So that's okay. So this is an old one. Maybe it's still updating. Wow. Okay. That's pretty cool. That's awesome. So the big stakers get a say in how things develop as well. I really, really like that mechanism. Okay.
Well, the kind of cool thing about that is, so like, if you plan on being Pulse Chain forever, as years go by, there's going to be different opportunities that present themselves. There's going to be different things that we want to do, and we want to be always evolving with the evolution of Pulse Chain. So with this DAO, the key community members can actually adjust our path based on where Pulse Chain is in the market. So right now, Inc, Pulse Chain, Hex, all these things are so cheap. So right now, pTGC is so cheap. So right now, we're putting all our efforts towards building a stronger bond with the Pulse Chain ecosystem, with burnt liquidity, and growing our web, because this web has actually shown to work so ridiculously well. So if Pulse Chain's half the rate of SAC rate, if Ink's only at $1 or $2, like it makes the most sense for us to continue to invest in ourselves, in our own protocol, to make our protocol stronger at this level. But, you know, who knows, 5 years from now, Richard Hart could be having this going on, or, you know, we don't really know what's going to come out of all this mystery between Pulse Chain, Atropa, the Maker DAO. Like, there's so much mystery behind this still. And if the DAO actually gives us an opportunity to capitalize on these things in the future, that if we're locked into specific taxations, like 0.5% of every transaction goes to LP add with PLS, which is awesome. It's automatic. It happens within every transaction, but then you're locked into that specific pool. So we wouldn't, if we, instead of, let's say that was 2.5 instead of 0.5, we had no DAO. Well, then we would not be able to add to the Inc pool and the PulseX pool and the Hex pool, and we wouldn't be able to actually grow our liquidity web naturally. And then we wouldn't be able to adjust ourselves over time to adapt with the scenario that presents itself on Pulse Chain as the evolution of Pulse Chain happens.
I see. Okay. So I just want to ask you about your web as well. You mentioned that there was about 20 webs with a lot of high volume. So what's helped you, what's prompted you for that decision versus more liquidity pools with less tokens in there? Is there anything in particular that's prompted that kind of decision making?
Yeah. So we want to tie ourselves with things that we know is going to last the entire existence of Pulse Chain. Like, obviously this stuff isn't guaranteed. Like, we take a little bit of a gamble with Teddy Bear or a little bit of a gamble with Atropa, but we had good confidence that these things will be here forever. But if we start taking shots in the dark at every token that comes out on Pulse Chain, the sad truth is 99% of them fail. So we would just be constantly adding ourselves to tokens that are just never going to rise up with us, which will be anchors to our protocol. So it's not so much that we only want to be tied to 20 protocols, whatever we're tied to. It's the fact that we don't want to risk being tied to a bunch of things that aren't going to move up with us and be anchors to our ecosystem over the long term.
Okay. Seems like a clever decision. Got it. Okay.
Also, if you have liquidity pools with tokens that are dead, there usually isn't liquidity in those liquidity pools. So as far as a user standpoint, like let's say you had pTGC, Well, you would want most of your liquidity to be with tokens that have tons of liquidity. So when you are ready to take profits, you can take profits into real value. But if you have liquidity webs built with things that actually don't have any real value backing them, and it's just like this paired with this, but there's no like end connection to real money, like no real end connection to PLS or wrapped ETH where you can actually get real value out of it. It's actually artificially grown liquidity, and there isn't as much value there, in my opinion, for the end user.
I would agree. The artificial liquidity can serve other kinds of purposes for other kinds of tokens, but otherwise it's not for the end user, not to be able to like put liquidity in and take liquidity out. So I mean, yeah, it's a pretty good dip at the moment. 80% against PLS. Oh no, this is USD. Okay, so against PLS is probably not as well. It's probably still a decent dip. But let's just take a look at this. Actually, I'm going to go to the daily chart on this one. So against PLS, so that was against USD. Against PLS, what do we got? So there was the high, and so now it's just trending down. So okay, 40% dip, 40% dip. So man, that's a nice looking chart. Okay. All right. So what about this one here? So the Ebonics lover is asking, what's your thoughts on Enki? Is that anything that you're familiar with? Anything to do with the Grays ecosystem, or this is just a random token?
It was made by a community member of the Grays ecosystem. He also created another support token to our ecosystem. As far as I know, it's a decentralized token. So those are like the things I like that don't really have much human interaction. It's buying and burning pTGC along with PDI and other things like that. This Inky token. And then it's like paying people out in Bear and Atropa and other things like that.
Okay.
Is if there's good intentions there, which I believe there is, then I think that's a good addition to the ecosystem of a whole. If it's the pTGC ecosystem, if it's the Atropa ecosystem, or if it's just in addition to the Pulse Chain ecosystem, you know what I mean? If there's good intentions there and there's product market fit, it should be good. Obviously, going back to 99% of stuff doesn't work out, and that was one of my main things, is to build projects that have so much product market fit and so much utility, like ultimately where they don't even need users to go up over time. That's how I like to design products. That's how I want to design products. And I just don't think everyone's doing that here. So I think Enki has a lot of those same fundamentals, because I know they mimic a lot of the things that we're building with our protocols. So I, wish them the best.
Okay, nice. Yeah, we can see that an alien thing going on here. Really cool little logo and text and everything as well. So yeah, I'm not too sure about that Ebonics lover, but there you go. So it is from a community member within the pTG ecosystem. So you should be on the SUI network. Pulse chain is dying. Nah, man. I think I definitely can see that point. The Pulse chain volume is certainly dying off. We're getting to really all-time lows, but hey, man, all I see is opportunity. So call me delusional, but I see seller's exhaustion. I see opportunity. So I think everyone.
You want to know something kind of funny about that?
What's that?
So if you go back to like the pTGC chart versus Pulse Chain, pTGC and UFO are a protocol that's dependent on volume and volatility, right? And since the launch of Pulse Chain, there has been lack of volume and volatility. It's actually, for the build of a volume-based protocol, we've actually been in a very unfavorable environment. So could you imagine, just for anyone listening, thinking, once the environment for pTGC and UFO become favorable, so volume and volatility is actually on Pulse Chain, if we have a chart looking like that in an unfavorable environment, could you imagine what our chart would look like in a favorable environment? It's actually mind-blowing to run some of the numbers.
Oh man, Oh, yeah. Let's, this is, let me just kind of make this point clear, because I think I'm just going to do like, let's just go with 4 blockchains at the moment. So let's say the first one, I think Solana's got the most. And then let's say this is the Ethereum volume. And then let's say this is base chain. And now Pulse chain, tiny. Tiny, right? Then look at the performance of these tokens. But what's going to happen as the bull run starts to end? So what actually happens is the liquidity is going to flow out of Solana. Everything's going to get extracted out. All the VCs are going to dump on you. There's going to be only maybe 1 to 5% of the people that actually win. The rest of the 95 to 90% of the people are going to be the suckers that lose. They're going to be greedy. They're going to hold way too long, and they're going to lose. They're going to lose. They're going to round trip. If anything, they're going to lose. They could potentially lose everything because they'll end up selling. That liquidity then is going to flow into something like Ethereum. All that volume, then that is all going to get extracted out, really probably along the same kinds of lines, because there is no conception of bonding there. So it's really, again, just going to be 1 to 5% of the winners. Then from Ethereum, it's going to flow out of Ethereum. So all that extra liquidity. So then base chain is going to have a big kind of run. Then it's all going to get extracted out of base chain. And you bet your bottom dollar base chain stinks in terms of like everything is just like rug pulls there. Then all that mass liquidity is going to hopefully flow into Pulse chain last. People, they don't care. They're not going to care about which chain is which. They're just going to go to where the money is. It's just going to flow to where the money is. So all we need is just a little bit of a sign of life here with 1 or 2 whales just kickstarting this little epic bull run within Pulse chain, which we have seen. We have seen it start to happen. So as this happens towards the end of the bull run, I mean, we're going to see a big balloon of volume coming in from all these other ecosystems into Pulse chain. So this is kind of the scenario that I see playing out. So I'm happy that we're low, because it just means everyone can continue to accumulate at these insanely low prices. And then again, look at how the prices perform against in this ecosystem where we haven't even had that much volume. So yeah, I mean, it speaks for itself. What's that 7? And that's not going to be perfect, but from the bottom, let's even just take it from this wick here, these candles here. This is some pretty phenomenal price performances, I must say. So we got some X's here, man. And I think this is where I first got into it here. So, this is 178X, 175X. So we're looking good. I'm happy. I'm happy with everything that's happening on Pulse Chain. I have a very positive spin on all of this. So
yeah, I don't know exactly what country you live in, but like I live in the United States, Australia. So I live in the United States, and more recently, a city called Austin, Texas became very, very popular. And it became so popular that everyone started flooding there, and now it's a very popular city. 5 years ago, it was not. But can you imagine the businesses that built their business in Austin, Texas before it was a pop-in city? Now their businesses have tons of users, tons of volume, people are flowing in and out. That's ultimately what we're doing right now. We are building the businesses in the city before the cities become the next popping city. Or Dubai before Dubai was Dubai. And that's ultimately all we're doing. And then like back to volume and volatility based protocols, like with just our bots, like right now UFO gets like 20K a day on average just from our bots. Well, as our liquidity pools, let's say Pulse Chain goes up 20x. Well, then we'll get 400K a day from our bots. Let's say Pulse Chain goes up 100x. Well, then we would get $2 million of volume a day just from our bots. That is no human interaction needed. So when you have $2 million of volume a day just from our bot action, and it actually, most days it's more than this, then naturally humans interact, because the R bots are interacting so much and buying and burning the supply so quick and adding LP so quick, it's forcing the price upwards, which is forcing humans to interact with the protocol, because the price is just getting pushed to ridiculous numbers, and they see that the machine does what we're talking about it does. So we're just building the businesses in the city before the city is a poppin' city. That's it.
And I love that analogy, man. The pulse chain city, I love it. I use that a lot. So that is a brilliant analogy, and I like how you connected it to something that happens in the real world. And what's really interesting about the way that pulse chain is set up. So in every single other ecosystem, you're going to be the chances of you being in the 95 to 99% of the losers that basically end up holding their tokens all the way down to minus 99% is very, 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 very high, because the liquidity pools that they're connected to is just, if this was on Ethereum, it would just be pTGC to Ethereum, pTGC to some sort of stable coin. So the value just goes right out of the avenue, out of one avenue. With Pulse Chain, this is the technology that's on Pulse Chain with the liquidity web. The liquidity can flow into like so many different ways that even if you lose in this particular token, let's say the liquidity starts flowing out of pTGC into PDI or Teddy Bear, and you've got then, okay, I missed out on selling the top of pTGC. Well, now I can sell some of the top of Teddy Bear, and then I might sell some of the top of Teddy Bear into my PDI because I want more PDI. And then, my PDI, that's $1 now. Like, oh man, the opportunities, it just blows my mind how good this is going to be. It's going to be such a cool end to the bull market, and there's going to be all these eyes that are going to be flowing into Pulse Chain, and then all of a sudden everyone that's going to be like, what is this thing with liquidity webs? What is the Atropa ecosystem? What is this technology that's been built on Pulse Chain? Then the mainstream influencers are going to go, holy shit, how did we not even know a single thing about this? This is actually quite literally a revolution on cryptocurrency and decentralized finance. And no, we haven't mentioned it. We didn't even know it existed until like 2 years after it even came into existence. It's like, I can't wait till the end of the bull market, man. It's going to be so cool.
Yeah, I'm actually just excited for the bull market and even the bear, because if you even look at like prediction of, I think you're talking about the Matic chart. Like the Matic chart goes up, let's say 100x. So let's say Pulse Chain goes up 100x. And then even in the bear market, it goes down 60%. Well, or 50%. Well, that's still a 25x from the point we are here. So if pTGC and UFO are operating at a 25x from this rate throughout the whole 3-year bear market, that is still absolutely amazing. So you're getting paid APY, buying burning supply, adding LP throughout a whole bear market at 25x the base token of where we are right now. So that means our volume will be upkicked 25x, our buy and burn will be kicked up 25x, our liquidity adding will be up 25x during the whole next bear market. So then for the next bull market, we have that much stronger foundation for the next push up as well. And you're earning APY the whole time. So you can sit throughout the whole bear market and get passive income instead of having to exit into fiat where the government's just going to print inflation against you anyways. You might as well be in a highly deflationary token that also gives you APY.
Love it. Absolutely love it, man. So let's round this up. Is there anything else that you wanna finish up on before I stop the screen share?
No, that's about it. I think we've been going for a while.
Yeah, we've been going for almost an hour and a half. So we've had a lot of people in the chat. So thanks everyone for all the contributions in the chat. We had some very famous people here. We had Richard Hart's brother, his only brother, Shane Schuler. Crypto Stylist came in at the end, so shout out to Crypto Stylist. So yeah, man, thank you so much. That was a great little chat. I definitely learned a lot more about pTGC. I hope the audience learned a lot more. I hope they learned a lot more about liquidity webs, even the way that we were drawing on the charts. I think that's going to help people connect with this idea of liquidity webs and showing the block explorer. Is there anything that you want to close on?
No, I think we hit it all. I really appreciate you having me up, and I hope we get to talk a lot more in the future.
Definitely, man. Yeah, as this thing progresses, if there's any updates, just reach out to me. We can definitely talk in the future. And yeah, everyone, good buys on pTGC. If you're holding stable coins, you got an 80% dip. So yeah, there's some good opportunities all around. And as the Greys mentioned a lot, that there's so many different ways that you can interact with pTGC. So very, very exciting to see all the different things with pTGC on Pulse Chain.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you very much, everybody. And you enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of your week. Take care.